so we did all the park, not all, but a lot of them.
Yeah.
And then they had to go to a big soccer tournament, and that's why they were over
Erhard, did you say it was 10 years ago?
there. 10 years ago.
I moved back here 10 years ago in May.
Really? Where were you?
are all things that we would, but
Yeah.
if you have questions. So we don't sit too long tonight. So I'll call the meeting to order, and there is no public, so I guess I don't need to ask for public comments, so we'll just move right into town reports. And so Vika had the town administrator's report here, which everybody hopefully has. And
Yeah, give me just.
start with that.
All right, so the town administrator report, a couple of things on it. So we've had it for several months. Committee members needed primarily planning board and board of adjustment appeals. This evening in the executive session, there is one new applicant that you will have the opportunity to decide whether or not you want to appoint to board of adjustment appeals, which is great. Relative to that, Board of Adjustment Appeals, I actually had a communication with the town attorney today, and he is ready to start the scheduling process with Board of Adjustment and Appeals relative to the legal cases that we have been involved with from almost 3 years ago now. And so it will be really helpful for those meetings to have more than 3 members present for those discussions. So that's something that will be discussed in the executive session. And as always, if anybody is interested, or if you know anybody, or, if you can, try to recruit people that could potentially want to join. Planning board needs 2 people, and the Board of Adjustment Appeals, after this evening, if you choose to appoint somebody, will still need an additional individual to make it a full board.
And for both of those boards, they have to be town residents.
They have to be, so they have to be registered voters, legal residents of the town, which makes it a little bit smaller of a pool of people to recruit from. So the next thing is the audit meeting. So based off of the last conversation, I did connect to the auditors. I did forward you the communication today. We did receive notice from the audit firm that once we started asking some questions, they have chosen not to proceed their relationship with us for fiscal year 25 audit. So effective immediately. We are in the process of needing to find an audit firm that will perform fiscal year 25 audit. I did reach out to the current firm last week, kind of asking for a timeline when things would be completed, and once again wasn't able to get a time frame. They were all out of town on some full employee out-of-state training, and so that delayed some of their responses to me. But that's where they currently stand right now with the audit.
Have they been paid full for last year?
No, so the process for last year, and what has been for the previous 3 years that they had, so this is the 4th audit, 2024 is the 4th audit that they're completing. They actually completed 2 audits more or less simultaneously within a pretty decent time frame, considering we were 2.5 years behind. And then last year, fiscal year 23 audit was complete in time to have all the appropriate information, but the way that they have billed is on ongoing basis, so they bill kind of as they do the work, which was very different from what the request was for the fiscal year 25, where not only was the price increased to about $7,000 or $8,000, but they were asking for half of it up front. So as of now, they will no longer be the audit firm for Shebig. I do plan to send out an email to, I have the ability to send out through a listserv an email to all of the town managers that are signed up for it through Maine Municipal. And so I do plan to send out an email to try to see what other municipalities use other than this particular firm, to see if maybe through word of mouth we can get some information about other possible firms that we can work with.
So does anybody have any questions about, so Vika just got that email yesterday, I guess,
Yes.
right? So
Yep.
we just found that Did you hear this, Eliza Jane? So the audit firm.
I figured it out, yeah.
Yeah, they decided they don't want to work with us. I personally would still like to meet with the audit firm. They still have our fiscal year 24 audit to complete, and I feel like this still deserves a conversation. I'm a little concerned based on their response. You know, the delays experienced during this year's engagement significantly impacted our scheduling and resources. I don't know what they mean by that, but I don't want to be, you know, I don't want to be identified as a problem town when we're out looking for other audit services. I do, personally, I have no qualms about the action that we took because it surprises me that, you know, they hadn't even completed this existing audit, meanwhile looking for, you know, money up front for the next upcoming audit. I think our request was reasonable. So that's me personally, but I would still like Vika to approach them and see if they'd be willing to meet with us. And leave the door open that, you know, we could reconsider this situation if they want. I mean, that was kind of the reason to have a conversation, is like, what's going on, guys? And the person that this came from, is this the person you've been working with?
So it's, the person that came from is the person who just sends that information out. A woman by the name Michelle is who Andrew and I have worked with over the last several months, basically collecting, providing information. And then there is a different individual by the name of Amy who we've worked with relative to assets because they compile our asset list. And there was another individual that Andrew and I recently, after attempting for several months to connect with, started working with to try to organize and clean our general fund and our accounts in a manner that would be more appropriate in line of what the expectations are. The way it was explained to us is that how our municipal general fund was organized and set up when we became a town, and more or less when Marjorie really put time into it, where we are now in terms of the amount of grants that we have, the very large sums of federal money that we have from FEMA, it makes keep tracking of all of that in one fund very difficult, which I think in return probably makes their process a little bit lengthier, which is still no excuse for the delays. But we had started the conversations with this one particular woman who was very pleasant to work with, who had worked for Trio, which is the system that we used for budgetary and everything. And so we finally felt like we were getting to a process where we can clean things up in a more orderly fashion that would make it easier for us to keep track of grants and keep track of federal funds and make it easier to provide them information. And we'll continue communicating with her until they cut us off, but until that fiscal year 24 audit is complete and they cut our ties, I'm gonna initiate my conversations with her as best as possible to receive as much information and assistance as we're able to, and then just, you know, go from there.
And I am a little concerned, I feel like we have a little leverage at this point to make sure they actually finish in a reasonable amount of time the fiscal year 24 audit, so I think
Do they
that-
have a legal contractual obligation?
not to the time, not to the deadline. They do have a contractual obligation, and we could certainly apply some pressure through that mechanism if we need to, but I think the first step is to
Yeah,
reach out and
sure.
try to have a reasonable conversation and see if we can, you know, maybe we can salvage the relationship. If not, I think then we need to, you know, and we also need to ask, when is this gonna be done? I think I did talk to several other towns I work with. Most of them got their audits at the end of December. They work with this firm and other firms, so it's a combo. And they're smaller than us and have less administrative resources, so I really don't know, you know, I think we need to figure out what the situation is. It's not such a big deal for the town. It's actually more of an issue on the school side, because the school funding, we have to have up-to-date audits for them to receive their funding allocation. They give you a couple of years grace period, on my experience anyway, on the school board, like they'll let you, be behind a year or two. But then there is a point where they say, if you can't get us your audit, if you're behind by 3 years, I think you might, it's not you lose your funding, but you're not gonna get it till it's in. And we, as Vika mentioned, during the pandemic there, we were behind.
2.5 years we were behind,
And
yeah.
what happened was there was a huge shift in the accounting companies, and a bunch of them stopped doing municipal audits. And so then everybody had to scramble to find people. So we may have a challenge trying to find somebody just based on their capacity, but there are a number of firms doing it. You could go on to the state of Maine audit site, and there is a section there about municipal auditing, and you can see what other towns are doing and who they're using, and so if you want to do that. And if we do have a meeting with them, I do think at least a representative from the finance committee, would be helpful for them to be there. And my goal would be to meet with them cordially and, not like on the table or anything. I just think I'd rather meet with them even if we're gonna truncate it.
Yeah, I agree. And I had the same question, like they were talking about these delays, what delays we're talking about. Some clarification would be great.
So anyway, not the best outcome, but I think better to find that out. I'm surprised that's their response.
So, and I apologize for being late, but do we have a date yet on when they'll be?
No, I think the board is now saying to Vika, we would like to meet with them. Even though they've sent this back in response to our request for a meeting, let's see if we can get a meeting.
Okay.
And if that doesn't work, then we'll see what happens.
So it's a little bit hard not to think that maybe some of our concerns and fears are actually true. And,
Right.
We sort of call them on it, and they're just, I mean, I could be totally wrong, and I hope I am, but I thought it was a rather strong response, and I can't figure out why you would do that unless.
My suspicion is they grew really fast, really quick, because they weren't this big when they took us on. And I think they took on a lot of municipalities, and that forced them to restructure. And this is, the few conversations, kind of phone conversations that I've had with the individuals that have worked on our audit, who I think are totally removed from the people above them who are making these decisions. And I think the restructuring caused some confusion for the employees. My take on that response is maybe they're kind of taking advantage of opportunities to pluck out a few. And when questions are being raised, it's just easier to say thanks, but no thanks. But that's kind of based off of, my interaction with a few of them over the last couple of months. That's kind of what I'm guessing.
And I did ask who's one auditor that I'm working with informally, and I asked, is it a practice to ask for the money up, part of the funding up front? And he said, not in his firm. He works for, I can't remember which firm, but Purdue, I think. And he said no. So, because that surprised me.
Well, and when the initial fiscal year 25 contract came in, my initial communication was to point out the fact that I'm not authorized to expend funds from a future fiscal year that hasn't been committed yet. And it came back with, if just an explanation of basically how we can get around it, which I found that to be really counterproductive advice from an auditor when our process is to try to follow the right process to avoid those things, but yet they're giving us suggestions of how to bypass that so they can collect money ahead of it. And so that I found strange. So, and I think just, lead into some of these questions is, I'm not surprised by the response of the email.
You said they got overextended, and I actually was thinking, when we had our last meeting, was that they were asking for the funding so they can bring out some more people that get caught up, maybe. And that's why they wanted to in the front.
But we should make sure Aaron, the superintendent, knows what's going on, because he's probably in a sense more impacted than we are.
Yeah.
But we will only be, right now, we're really only behind with the fiscal year 24 on.
Correct.
So, and we were in worse shape before, and the fiscal year 23 audit, they did get done on time, so.
Sure.
But what we were hoping to have and sort of remind people that we didn't know the exact balance of the undesignated fund, and so we made some judgments about how much money we could appropriate from the undesignated fund, thinking that at the special town meeting we'll have at the end of the summer or early fall, we might make a second appropriation. So we definitely want and should expect to have the actual undesignated fund balance by that time.
And have it in time to have a discussion about it in the meeting.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Yes.
we'll need at least 2 weeks lead time. Okay. Thank you.
Next thing is communication policy. So the current communication policy was attached in your package just for review. Some of them, it might have been the first time you've seen it. Others, it might be, last time since the last time we did the orientation that you've seen it. But I do have some suggestions about possible changes that I will probably in the future bring forth to you. And so I just wanted you to become familiar with the current policy, so you have an idea of what the current policy is with some potential proposed changes. The remote participation, which meetings get recorded, which meeting don't, all of that, there's really no policy or procedure as to how that happens. Most of that is falling on me, which I think is really improper use of taxpayers' funds to have the town administrator oversee all that. I have tried passing it on to other people. It always comes back to me being the person who ends up taking it on. And so I think that it could be an opportunity to restructure that process and maybe start thinking of something a little bit more substantial in terms of remote participation or meeting or recording or whatever the system we have when it comes to the next budget process. And so I'm not sure what those suggested changes would be yet, but in the near future, just wanted to put that on your radar that there'll most likely be something coming down in front of you in the future.
And so this would cover, this is really directed towards kind of town communication, not really select board, but town communication with the, public, right?
Yes, yep. Town communication with the public, there's a blip in there about communication with the town administrator, communication with the town attorney. I've found one time where, a board member was communicating with the town attorney that I didn't know about, and the entire board hadn't directed that individual to do it. So little things like that, if everyone is on the same page and is current of what the communication process is, it might make it easier for everyone to have a general idea. When you as a board all receive a communication, right now, there's more or less a general understanding of what the process is. But I think, this policy warrants to maybe some updating and a little restructuring to bring it to what the current process is within the municipality, more or less.
Susie, do we have a date of when this policy came into being?
It's on
2000 and-
Yeah. Say 2013, yeah.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
And that was when it was probably last, it maybe was
Updated.
adopted and hasn't been changed
Yeah.
since then.
I don't think I had looked back, I don't see any changes from really its original adoption date. I've definitely brought it in front of previous boards before. There have been discussions, but no changes.
And, I think also we have text messaging now, and maybe that's something we should consider adding. And then there are other ways to post information than physically putting it on a bulletin board particularly say at
Chandler's.
So, maybe we can think of what's realistic for.
Yeah, and so the locations where the agendas and meeting notices have to be posted is within the select board ordinance. And so those changes would need to be required to bring to a town meeting for, maybe eliminating that from the select board ordinance and put it in the communication policy, because the board can update that without a town meeting
Right.
to make it more streamlined.
I would agree. I think having that in the ordinance is kind of foolish.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, because then it really puts us, if we don't post it at Chandler's, somebody can bring it, against us in terms of not following the process, so.
So everybody understands an ordinance is, adopted by town meeting, and we are bound to follow the guidance in an ordinance. A policy is a guideline, but we're not, sort of technically bound to follow it to the T if.
And it could be changed at a select board meeting by the board, so. The next thing is the traffic and parking workshop, so it had been discussed to sometime in August to hold a workshop. So I did throw out, based on more or less the availability of this building and how busy the summer is, the few dates in August, just a couple dates in August, really. Those are the dates that this building, which I think for such event is the most appropriate location to have, are available for a traffic and parking workshop. So I don't know if the board had a chance to prior to reading this, to see if any of those dates could work for all of you. If so, I would like to kind of coordinate that and set it up so we can really blast it, so nobody could say that they did not have a notice about this particular workshop.
So August 3rd is a Sunday?
So I did put a couple of them, if not maybe all of them, on a weekend, just to keep it more open to different timeframes, and again, the availability around the calendar for this particular building.
So personally, I would avoid Sunday, but the 9th is a Saturday.
Do we know what's happening in general on the island?
Well, I think because we
There's a lot of, the children's theater takes up a lot of time here. There are a lot of events happening in this building.
That's at the end of July. The theater.
Yes, though a lot of those are on the end of July, which I would avoid trying to do it in the next 2 or 3 weeks, which really puts us to end of July, which limits to, this place is booked right out through, I was shocked with the lack of availability for this building, so.
Looking at the dates myself, I think, I would prefer a weekend morning as opposed to a night meeting, and, so I would shoot for August 9th at 9 AM here.
I like a Saturday morning. I think could be the easiest time for people who work, and we're likely to have a lively discussion. So Saturday morning, the 9th would be my first choice.
That's my last choice.
Oh,
I could make it, but I have guests who will be at the house.
Yeah, we have guests that week too.
but they're gonna love this conversation. Really engaging.
The 3rd is not bad.
I would probably not to do it on a Sunday.
Oh, for the public.
For the public, and plus, I'd stay away from Sunday mornings.
Yeah, sure. I think the 9th is
But
good.
that's
like-
Sunday
I think so,
afternoon, I
mine.
suppose, but I think this time of year would be, if we're gonna do it on a weekend, I think morning is our best bet.
And a Saturday.
Saturday,
Work the best.
I think you'd be more likely to bring out the best crowd on a Saturday morning than you would any other time.
Right.
And if that's what you're aiming for, that's, I think, the ideal time.
Let's give it a nice name, and
And I will say, because it's a workshop, while it is good to have the select board present there, there's no obligation, because you're not making any decisions. It's really going to be an opportunity for the public to vent. That's really what you're providing this, and there is not gonna be an opportunity for the select board to sit there and kind of delegate and discuss. You will have this workshop, or the municipality will have this workshop, and then on one of the following meetings, you will kind of take all of that information, and you will have a discussion in a regularly scheduled board meeting to determine how you want to utilize that information in any potential changes to the ordinance.
And May I suggest that the meeting that we had around Shorefront where people sat in groups and had questions and people took notes, that might be a nice way to solicit people's opinions on things. So that might be a nice way to collect information from people instead of having it in a large group. So that's one suggestion I might make, and the other is, I like while you call it a workshop, which I understand we need to do, I like to have it called a community conversation, because it's really a conversation about it. As you say, no decisions are made, but it's really about collecting information and hearing what people have to say. So I like the conversation word in there as well.
And I think we could put together a mailing or a postcard or something that sort of describes the objectives, so people don't come expecting something else. And then a question would be, would it make sense to have somebody facilitate the meeting that is not us? And I think having some structure to some of the questions like we did at the coastal erosion meeting can be beneficial, so that you actually do accomplish you try to get some of the questions answered that that the community's we know the community has. So I wonder, I bet I could try, I think the Island Institute might have somebody that could come at no cost. The other people would be GPCOG, so either one would, I mean, Christine Egan's great, I just think we may want to use her for our retreat, again, if she's willing.
I can email her and ask her that we're interested in, having some assistance for both of these events, and maybe she'd be willing to do one and send somebody else.
So we get one day a year with Christine, according to the contract.
Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
So we could use her, if we used her for the board retreat, there certainly are other people that are good.
Yeah, I do think getting the right person to facilitate is important, because if you get somebody who's used to a really urban audience, it might be very different.
I think they have some good candidates.
Yeah, if that's great. So I do think either the Island Institute or GPCOG would be good, but I think having somebody facilitate it, we can provide kind of input on what the structure and questions can be, but I think it might be beneficial to sort of not be the people running the show, and for Vika especially, who hears a lot of complaints.
Yeah, parking and traffic, it's taken up a lot of my time. My Monday morning, probably the first 2 hours of my week was relative to a lot of that. Carol, would you be willing to reach out to Island Institute just to see if anyone, and I'll connect with JP or her particularly and see where that could lead us?
Actually, another option, I think she'd be excellent, is Ellie.
Who?
Ellie.
Ellie?
I think Ellie could do a really good job, and she's taken the vote enough that she has some concept of what it means. I
She
mean,
knows enough about the town and the area.
I think, I actually really like that idea. That could really give her an opportunity. I mean, she's done so much for the community, but giving her a chance to lead something that is so
yeah,
big.
and she helped with, she did one of the coastal erosion groups, so and she did a good job. I was in her group. But I think she's young, she's familiar, she's good at it. So I will ask, if people are okay with that, I would start with her, because just logistically, it's even easier to.
Yeah.
And I think she will do a great job.
So, we have August 9th at 9 AM.
Yeah, here,
Agreement?
yeah.
And we're going to call it, it's a workshop about parking and community conversation.
Yeah, we could come up with a name.
I'll make sure
right?
we reserve the hall for that,
And personally, this
like
time
9
of
to
year,
12.
I would send out a postcard, because we do get a bit, in my experience, when we did it for the Stonewall meeting, for example, we tend to people get bombarded with all this stuff, so a postcard does kind of rise to the top. I don't know how people feel, but,
I think we do all the news outlets.
great, but I
So
do
we have
think,
a flyer that's on the postcard and on the Facebooks and on the shadid.org and posted.
good, all right, so that's great, and I think we've been promising people this, so, and we gotta be prepared, we better put on our riot gear.
Yeah.
So relative to the parking and traffic ordinance, we had ordered some signs. They've taken a little bit to arrive for different areas of the island, Bennett's Cove and whatnot, for signage relative to the changes that were adopted a few weeks ago. We do have some signage that the town office made up that I drove down today with Jeff Westcott, so we can all be on the same page as far as where they're going. We have, the office staff is going to be connecting with Ellie and working with her and utilizing her quick turnaround ability in making more or less just, not a postcard, but a flyer that is going to litter this island. It's gonna get put on any car that gets a ticket or warning or things like that, because the most common excuse is, well, you don't have any good signage. And when I say you can go to the town website for most up to date, the response is, I'm not gonna go to the town website. And so this way, this seems to be the best avenue. So those are some of the things that we're working on in the time being. The boot has arrived, so it is officially on the island. And so
Just one?
Could be you.
we just started out with one, just to see Portland. I reached out to Cumberland County Sheriff's Department, who ultimately led me to Portland, who gave me some recommendations. There is a million options online, but I didn't want to spend several $100s on something that somebody can easily snap off. And so Portland gave us a good, reasonable recommendation that we ordered. And so it is on the island, and we're going to put it to good use.
And so who does apply the boot? Is it the parking attendant, or is it Officer Mailman, or either one?
So
I mean,
how
how does it work?
I don't remember exactly what the language was in the ordinance, but my recollection is the authority was given at the town administrator's discretion to have the parking attendant apply the boot. But then, because the Cumberland County Sheriff works under a contract for the town, because it's up to the town administrator discretion, I can also ask the sheriff to do it as well. And so that's where, I've reached out to him on a number of occasions and said, can you run to this location or that location? Because he's on the clock outside of the regular attendant times to, send out or give out parking tickets. So both of them, based on how things are lined up right now, should be able to put that thing on.
What's sort of the criteria for that? I mean, there's obviously a lot of parking.
There is,
There's some, like I've seen cars that have 3 tickets on them.
because of the language that's up to the TA's discretion, I think it really leaves the window very open for the decision-making. So I've had the brief conversation with the parking attendant. A location like Bennett's Cove, there is no overnight parking there. So that first night, I'd say just put that boot on to really just make a point. We had a car that was parked there this weekend for 4 nights. When I finally got up, and it's the second time this particular company has done this. When I finally got a hold of somebody, I pointed it out that they parked in front of literally in front of no overnight parking. That his reasoning was, we don't have a municipal parking lot for him to park in. He didn't have it. He sent his employees home because there was no reason for them to be here after they got done working on Thursday. And the next available barge wasn't until Tuesday. So in his opinion, that was the most reasonable place he could leave it. And so when I explained to him that the change recently was made, that the first night it's 25, the second it's 50, the third it's 75, and then after each night it's an additional 75. At first, he kind of gave me a hard time about how why would I ask him to contact one of his 30 customers on the island to move the vehicle, when he realized that it wasn't just one $20 ticket, it was really quickly accumulating. He said that he would have the car moved, and he did get the car moved. had we had that boot would have been on it, and at this point, because it's to the TA discretion, I'm gonna say that we don't take that boot until you physically walk into the town office and you pay every single parking ticket up front before that boot is taken off. And there's not gonna be a lot of people that we have to do that with, but the people that we are gonna have to do that with are repeated offenders who don't feel the need to pay. And so I think that's gonna be unfortunately how we're gonna have to make the point, so, let's just,
And, the other day I had to go to Long Island and I paid $50 to park in Portland. I mean, it made me realize, that's what it costs.
Yeah.
So,
Really, $60?
50 for 5 hours, yeah.
Is that like at the halfway line?
It's at public pay for parking.
In the unlocked commercial?
So, I mean, if that's what it pays to park, it should cost a little more to violate the parking.
That's it.
yeah, and I mean, I've had another conversation with a contractor that comes here on an annual basis, and he parked in a no parking place, and he got the ticket, and he was extremely rude to me. He wanted me to waive it, and when I said no, he basically threw it in my face that I was refusing services to customers on Shabig, which it has nothing to do with that. It's not, and he ultimately, I said, if you don't pay it, fine, we'll send it to collections, but I'm not waiving it. And so there are some contractors that have this sense of, you're limited resources, we're providing services to you, why don't you accommodate us? They wouldn't ask for the same level of accommodation in Portland, but they feel like here, it's appropriate. And unfortunately, I think this is the extreme that some of them are gonna have to realize, because, Bartlett Tree, that's 2 times they've left their car there for 4 days, thinking that it was absolutely no issue that it was parked right in front of no parking overnight sign, because to them, that was the most logical solution. They didn't care what the municipal ordinances were.
Karen. So, I think a picture speaks 1,000 words, and I, as a select person, have heard feedback about the notion that is very misinformed about the boot or the not boot or a tow truck. So I'm going to suggest staging a picture of a vehicle, like you can use my car, but put it on a vehicle and leave it at the stone pier with a information sheet on it. We can take a picture of it, take a picture of the information sheet, because I think making it clear that this is reserved for repeat offenders in extreme situations. But I think that would be a good way to make it a visual for people. And it could stay there for a couple of days, but it could be any vehicle. But I think that would be a good way to have the visual that has people asking about accurate information with an information sheet for them to refer to.
We're creating a section on the webpage with a lot of this information on it.
Yeah.
And so with this informative piece of paper that we're gonna compile, a goal is to kind of have a QR code where we're distributing this information on their windshield wipers, but then this is where Ellie is gonna come in to help. She doesn't know it yet. Where they can go to the QR code and it will direct them to the town website that nobody wants to go to with all of the additional information, describing some of that, so.
But I think that's a great idea. I've always thought a little piece of paper should go on windshields with information like that. And the QR code's the easiest way to do it. Good job.
Kind of the future here.
And I think also we can alert CTC and ask them to, join us in our effort to get people to comply. I think just letting them know is a good idea, so that when people are new to the island especially, they have some idea. But, and it's time, because the real problem has been enforcement.
We are going to put a blip on the permits page.
Good.
So when people are applying for building permits, there's gonna be information up there, most current rules and regulations for traffic and parking, something like that. So then, the contractors who want to find a lot of reasons can't say that they don't know about it. So creatively try and find ways to spread it other than putting it on our website and have it be the only location. I do like the idea of maybe reaching out to CTC if they could do the same thing on, the documents that they're asking people to fill out, to sign when they're barging vehicles over here. Maybe they can put the town QR code on that or something, they're always reaching out to ask to remind us to fix this or that. So this might be a good way to have them return the favor.
May I make one more suggestion? I like the idea of Officer Mailman doing any initial booting.
I agree.
I
It
think that he,
feels law enforcement and
Yeah.
also gives the parking attendant kind of a little card.
let's be protective of
Oh, he's very excited to use that boot.
it. Okay, thank you.
Yep. And so the last thing is select board orientation. I did have a call with Ben McCall today. He's got a very busy month coming up, but he is hoping that it could work for everybody for him to come out to the island the morning of July 30th.
And remind me again, who's Ben McCall?
Ben McCall is the town attorney. So Natalie Burns was a longtime town attorney through Jensen and Baird. Ben McCall took over when she retired, and Jensen and Baird closed their municipal division. He moved to Drummond and Woodsum, so he is the municipal attorney. I have never met him in person. Nobody on the board has met him in person, and so he has never been to Shebig. And so this is the one date that works for him. I told him I would bring it to your attention. He would come out. And so prior to that, what we kind of discussed today is maybe Carol and I connect with him to come up with some bullet points of what the discussion topics would be. And it would be, at this point, he was thinking maybe more or less like an informal discussion over lunch or something where we can go through some of these things. It would still have to be advertised. If we did it upstairs at the Niblick, people could still come, but there would be no participation on their level. They could sit, they can listen all they want. But this way, he could help in the process of going over what's important, what's freedom of access, why communication is important, why representing yourself as a select board member in certain ways, what is or isn't appropriate, and have that be kind of the process that we take, utilizing the opportunity to meet the town attorney and have him see, maybe Bennett's Cove or the Stone Pier or all of these different areas that I'm emailing him about on a regular basis and kind of knock out a couple of birds with one stone.
What time and where?
So, well, to start out, we had the date, and then we were gonna go from there. Most likely, I would assume he would probably come on the 10 o'clock boat, and then we could, maybe see if the Niblick upstairs could be reserved, and we can order some sandwiches, and we can sit up there in one of the round tables and have semi-informal discussion that had some, general ideas of what the discussion topics would be, and kind of see if that would work. If the board wants to have it more formal here, he was kind of hoping that maybe that wouldn't be the case, but if that's the way that the board wants to go, then by all means, that's the direction that he'll go with.
What's his name?
Ben McCall.
Yeah, I'm just curious about, I understand that you have a quorum and it's a big public meeting, but that's when we're talking town business, right? Like, is there no time in which we can all be together for educational purposes or whatever that doesn't involve the citizenry? I'm just curious. It seems an odd thing to me when I work for government.
There are
So there are very specific, there's like a handful of very specific times where the municipality and the board can discuss things in executive session. Personnel matters, which we will be going into tonight, is one of them. Discussing relative to like land acquisition and development is one of them. At the end of the day, you are public representation of the community. Any discussion about the municipality has to be a public discussion, has to be advertised within 3 days of advance, and 3 days in advance of a meeting, and has to allow for an opportunity for the public to come. He did remind me of that today when we talked, and he said that for a number of years, the Portland Council did visits to their little islands, and then they never advertised that, and somebody called them out on it, and that's for Portland Council to simply to go to a town island as a group, they still have to, so unfortunately, it's,
And so I think, we can all go to an MMA training session together that's, not specific to Shabbat. But this is really talking about
Yeah.
the Shabbat Select Board, so
Yeah.
it's gotta be public.
Yeah.
And it is a little constraining, and actually, one of the things we will probably ask him to go over is the concept of what constitutes a topic for executive discussion, executive session, because it's very specific, and there's like 8 cases or something, 8 categories, and I think it's important that we do understand that, because when we did our retreat last year, we did it off island, and it was noticed, but we were the only ones that were there.
Yeah.
Which was handy.
Yeah.
Yes.
yeah,
But, and so it was noticed that people could have been there.
Right.
Yeah,
And you
yeah.
never know, and they do that, certainly in other communities, I'm well aware of, meetings that some people just, attend them all. So
Yeah.
I think for us, it wouldn't bother me anyway, if for the select board orientation, who knows, maybe we'd recruit a future select board member, but I think, and maybe a former select board member would wanna come and offer their thoughts, but I think meeting then is also a big, a big benefit of this meeting besides getting some select board orientation. So, and maybe at that meeting, or, when he's there, I was thinking it might be beneficial to have an executive session for legal, so we can get his take on where we are on the various cases, because he was pretty easy to understand when he did that a year ago or so. So
Yeah.
I would take advantage of being here and do that.
That would mean moving from the Niblick. I like the Niblick location if that's gonna work, but if we're doing executive session,
Yeah.
have to come here. So just making sure another.
I don't think we would have to come here, but what we could do, I think, is maybe we could start out at the town office in the conference room.
Yeah.
Have that executive session and then move to the.
yeah,
Sounds good, thank you.
yeah. And I mean, and maybe he can come on the 8 o'clock boat, and, I give him a tour of the island and show him all the different locations, and then we could do executive session and then the Niblick. But there's, the first thing was to secure the date. He's got a pretty full month, and he wanted to make sure that he accommodated us in the next couple of weeks, if that's something that we wanted to work. And then he said what he would do is he would square away the whole day for us, knowing that it will likely not take a whole entire day, but this way he would have the flexibility to work around our schedule to make it possible. So does that date work for everybody? It's a Wednesday, July 30th.
But I'll make it where I had plans.
That's Wednesday.
Yeah.
Wednesday, July 30th, yeah.
And you could be there for just the portion,
Plan to be overnight elsewhere. If it was at night, that'd be easier.
well, I think daytime is better for him too.
Yeah.
Yes,
The 30th, Wednesday the 30th.
Right.
Wednesday, July 30th.
So after the 10, yeah.
In speaking with him today, he is ready to start working with the Board of Appeals to coordinate a date for them. And I will elaborate a little bit more relative to personnel matters in executive session about that,
Okay,
so.
great. So, Gary was thinking we had a light agenda, but these were kind of important things to go over, and I'm excited about the traffic parking workshop.
So that's everything I have for the TA report. I do have a little bit under communication and other business that I will bring up to you. And then relative to the other reports, there was our first ever parking and traffic report from, the parking attendant worked, him and I worked to kind of compile a couple basic bullet points relative to that, the standard, report that we've been receiving, that Jeff Westcott puts together for Public Works and Solid Waste, and then a detailed report from, Paul Demers, which, we have not been receiving as regularly. And I'm hoping that with the start of the new fiscal year, that maybe we can start getting more regular reports from code enforcement officer, fire department, and harbor master.
So does anybody have any questions for Vika about the reports that we received? I'm glad Paul was able to provide a report, and I think it's very extensive, and going forward, I think if he could do it monthly, he could make it short. And
Yes.
I'm fine with the kind of bulleted reports that, Public Works does, and this parking report is fine for me. Because this type of report would take longer to prepare. I guess the only question I had was, the whole violence situation. I just want to be sure everybody understands what's happening there in terms of code enforcement, code enforcement.
So there's a secondary officer that's doing that coverage.
Right, so he doesn't have to go over there, that person is paid by I guess it's actually the contractor, not the owner, is that how it works? Okay. And how does the payment work, do we get paid and then pay the code enforcement
Well,
guy?
the original discussion was it was just gonna go straight from them. Most recent, there was some communication where, the firm that's working on all of the work over there, which is, it's slipping my mind right now. Yes, Knickerbocker, thank you. They were gonna be paying that code enforcement officer directly, but I think what's happened is they are very eager to receive some of, CO, occupancy permits. And so there has been some miscommunication and hesitation about payment on their part, and so they wanted it to go through the town. And I have refused to do that until we receive a payment from Knickerbocker, and then I would be happy to redirect that payment to, we have yet to receive that, and so that's communication amongst them to figure out.
But the guy is doing the code enforcement.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
And I do think that it is more appropriate for the town to pay the third-party inspector.
And that's fine, but I want that payment from Knickerbocker, because I don't wanna then start hassling them for lack, I don't want the town to be out of,
Right, and
So.
I would also say he's done quite a bit from the description already, so I would say until they pay for even, what he's already done.
Hope Island is right now very eager to receive some documents, and I know Paul is really putting his foot down and making sure that the code enforcement officers are taken care of before there's any further proceedings. The tax assessor, last time they were here, did reach out to, or asked me to coordinate another visit out there, and so I connected Paul and the assessor, so Paul can coordinate a visit for the assessors to go out there and assess any updates and work that has been done in the last year, to make sure that we have that in our system before we commit taxes for fiscal year '26, and that is in our system before we commit taxes. So.
Since it was sort of an informal process about how this auxiliary inspector was gonna be paid, we don't have that in our budget, correct? There's no budget line or money.
Correct.
Money out.
Yeah, there's been communications through email, so there is definitely written documentation if need to.
So we need to create that.
But it would, so what I would, in a case like that would more or less would siphon through like a miscellaneous income account, where we would collect that money, put it in miscellaneous income, and pay out of miscellaneous income. so expense accounts don't get impacted by it, so.
It seems a lot more appropriate, this was because the contractor's paying the inspector.
And that was, yeah, so anyway, I think that's a good solution to the access issues over there. I just wanted to be sure I understood what was happening, but, anyway, there's a lot of, as Paul says in his report, a lot of interest in the activities over there, but the answer to that is that we do have a presence over there on behalf of the town, making sure they're
Yeah,
following.
I think that the town is more aware of the work that is going on there in the last year than they've been in a decade, if not longer. So I feel pretty confident that the communication that Paul has, they've got their bases covered, and the assessor is also staying on top of it to make sure that the changes are adequately assessed and represented in what would be expected for a payment.
I'm just curious, is that still considered a single property, or?
It is a single property. Yep.
owner?
Yep.
And half of the taxes go to the town of Cumberland.
Yes, we have a
Is that in
50
perpetuity?
50-year debt where there are several islands that the town owns that half of all outer island taxes go to for 50 years. Yeah.
It's the last remaining ransom we're paying.
Yep.
All right, so I think we can move on to regular business, and we don't have too many things to tackle in this section. But, and Vika, fortunately, this, she's written out these agenda items as potential motions. So the first one relates to the request for proposals for residential energy efficiency and electrification, collective purchasing, and this is something that Ellie has pursued really on her own initiative because she saw a need. She did that energy presentation a few months ago, and she really said, part of it, and she's been working with a lot of these contractors, and I think she sees that, if we get 5 or 10 people, they're gonna come over, they might give you a better price. So, and they are doing this in other towns, so she's kind of adopting that program for us here on our own. And so what the goal is to put out this request for proposals, to see if some contractors would give some pricing for, different amounts of people, and how would that, and she does already have some, people interested in, say, having either an energy audit or having weatherization services or, solar or whatever. So that's what it's about, and I think so it has been reviewed by the climate action team. It's also been reviewed by Steve Hinchman, former revision attorney, so, and he was fine with it, and then, if you guys have comments, we can, take them up now. If not, I recommend we approve it.
Of course, I have comments.
Oh, okay.
In full disclosure, I'm on the list to get heat pumps.
Great.
And when talking with Ellie about the process she went through and doing the RFPs with the town and the school, and she's really developed a nice area of expertise. And I've been beating the bushes with people saying, well, did you know? I think that we have a good cohort of people who would like to have the services of this group discount. So I think it offers a great service to the island. So I want to be in all clarity the fact that hopefully our household will be one of them. But I think it's a really good way to move forward. So I'm thrilled to talk about this.
And the only thing I would add, I think it's a great thing, and, kudos to her, because we wouldn't have the energy to kind of organize this, but this is, in a sense, a municipal initiative, driven by Ellie. And so I think one thing, those of you who are on the CTC committee could approach CTC. When Team Rubicon came over, they charged us half price. And I would ask them again to extend that kind of a discount for this municipally oriented thing that benefits a larger group of people on the island. I would, if you guys are comfortable, I'm just making that suggestion sort of personally, but I think, because this is kind of town driven, it would make sense to me that, CTC could,
How many people are we talking about?
We don't know yet, because she's really getting prices.
Numbers of contractors, so.
Oh, I think it will depend on who responds.
Yeah.
And I think part of this also is that it does provide access to a contractor, because one of the things is when you're the single person trying to get them to come over for your hot water heat pump, it's like they're not gonna come for you. So, but
And also it would be for a period of time, so they might be here for 1 week or two, and we could look at housing opportunities as well. So I know that Ellie's very resourceful, that,
Right.
I think CTC would probably be quite supportive.
okay, so anyway, so any specific comments on the proposal, as you can see, she has a release date of tomorrow. So, she wants to get this out there because, as you know, what do you call it, reimbursements and, programs, for, rebates are gonna be, at least for many of these things, will be, completed, by December. And it's an expectation they won't continue into the next calendar year, and of course, I think just recently, the budget vote that was passed was trying to kill some of that stuff even earlier. So bottom line is, I think there is this urgency on this. Okay, so anybody wanna make a motion on 2548?
Sure.
Go ahead.
So I'm making a motion that we should authorize the town administrator to send out the request for proposals for residential energy efficiency, electrification, collective purposes.
Second, Eliza Jane. Any more discussion?
And a big thank you to Ellie.
All right, all in favor? Great. So the next item of business is 2549, and this is, again, written as a motion, and this is in relation to some of the other work that Eliza Jane just mentioned that Ellie was doing on the mini split, not multi, but mini, I think, split heat pump system for the public safety building. And so I think, is everybody up to speed on what this project is, or, Erhard, if you need some information, I just don't know.
Well, I mean, it seemed like, so essentially town offices look like they're putting multiple units in the town offices, and I've never walked in the back way, so there's a lot of units, so there's probably one for each room, and that's why they're mini splits. And then there's the heaters out in the apparatus floor, I assume.
Right.
Yep.
The motors aren't working.
Right, and so there's a pretty good incentive through an efficiency Maine municipal program right now that we're taking advantage of. It's a pretty good discount.
Half,
Half, and the
yeah.
school is doing the same, they're even going further, and so but we also realized that we did need to repair the heating units. We don't expect to have to use them much, but they need to be functional, and it turned out that that's not particularly expensive. And then they're gonna put in a heat pump water heater at the Public Works garage. They did look at the Public Works garage, but because they had the doors open and all that jazz, it didn't make sense. So, if anybody wants to tackle this motion. Okay, Leslie?
Okay, so I would,
Just,
motion for 25, can I just say -049 as written? Or do you want me to read
You
it?
can.
That would be good. Well, actually, for the public, I think I
Okay.
should read it because I haven't read it.
Because we're really proud of it, actually.
Yeah.
This is a big accomplishment, and say it was a large amount of effort, and set her up for this next project she's doing with residential energy efficiency. 25-049 to authorize the town administrator to sign the Efficiency Maine rebate offer for multi-split heat pump system at the public safety building, and allowed to expend up to $31,000 from building facilities reserve account 9030 for the cost of heat pump installation to repair the heating ceiling units in the apparatus bay and installation of a heat pump hot water heater at the Public Works garage. Thank you, Ellie.
So do I have a second? Richard, second, and any discussion? All in favor? Enthusiastically.
And crazy.
thank you.
That's great. All right, so now we're gonna move on to, and I personally prefer when it's possible, if he can write it in that format, it certainly makes it better, so, and then
Yeah.
Chris doesn't have to fumble around and figure out what we actually said. So, we'll try to do that when we think of it. Other business, I think, Vika, why don't we first go with you on other business?
Yeah, so I did forward fairly late this afternoon, but what I forwarded you is, there was a link to click on, and inside of it was basically, so September, the Island Fellow through Island Institute, we will have for 2 years with us, we'll be starting. It was something that had been approved and voted on. Now we're just kind of in the final stages of the logistics of it. Because I'm a town administrator, not a town manager, this is a perfect example of something that I need your authority to sign. It's something that came to me a few days ago. We had to do some changes because my name was misspelled. Changes were made, and it was in front of me within the last couple of days. I would like to avoid delaying it another 2 weeks. And this is, the other business is an opportunity to be able to put something in front of you that's not too controversial, that hopefully the public wouldn't be upset at not seeing as formally advertised. But what I need is, I need a motion from the board, if you're okay to move forward with it, to authorize me to sign the Island Institute Fellows Program MOU. With the between Island Institute and Town of Shebig, and so this will give me a chance to sign it, send it to them, and then the kind of a lot of those final.
Refresh on my memory, have we already signed a contract? I mean, have we already authorized the funding as a board?
The funding was allocated in the expense admin, so there is money specifically set aside for paying the fellow under the admin contracted services, so effective July 1st, that's where that money is. So this is kind of tightening up the contract between Island Institute and Shebig for that MOU.
All right, so somebody tackle the next motion. Go for it.
I'll do it. I'd like to file a motion to allow Vika to sign the MOU agreement with the Island Institute regarding the Island Fellow for September 1st of 2025.
No, you're good, that's fine. Yep, that's perfect, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So we need a second for that motion, David, okay? And any discussion about that motion? So we're not authorizing funding, we're just authorizing this agreement between the two parties. Okay? And we have, it came through our email, you know.
It's essentially terms and conditions.
Yes, yeah, there,
I'm looking at it right before voting, I'm looking at it right now. Is that the full amount that we will need for the housing?
annually, yes, so it's two, so per year,
Per year?
It's-
So this amount will cover
the whole year,
housing.
yep.
Have you been in conversation with the person in charge of the housing?
No, because this is one, so we communicated with Island Institute that we were gonna pay the full amount. Island Institute is then in charge of taking care of the rest,
Thank you.
so
Yep.
that's,
Any other questions? Okay, all in favor? Great. Any other business?
nope, I have some things under communications, but nothing that I need.
We're doing the swap on our committees.
Oh, right, so we should do that, and can you guys refresh my memory on, so basically, because we authorize it as a motion at the last meeting, Earhart and Eliza Jane are switching.
Right. So we'll be on CTC and I'll be on.
So how should we handle that? In other words, we actually did do a motion, so we can't just change it. So can we do a motion to, reassign
Eliza to CTC.
Do you have those
committee
minutes
and
on you?
myself
From
to-
last minute? No. Okay, so I would just do a new motion of assigning whoever you want to one committee, and then a new motion assigning to whoever you want to the other committee. I think I'm a little confused by,
Okay, I'll make a
Well,
motion.
let Gerhard,
Well-
we'll take a, go ahead.
Well,
I was gonna motion him then.
yeah, I'll make a motion here.
Oh, okay,
Make a
well, I
motion
think it
to-
could be in one motion or.
Liza to be assigned to the CTC.
Thank you.
So that needs a second. And
and then second is Richard.
all in favor, sorry.
Now,
And I'd like to make a motion that Gerhard Rutoff will be a member of the Stone Wharf Committee,
We're calling them subcommittee.
subcommittee.
Yeah, just to make it clear. I need a second, Richard, all in favor, this is procedural.
You get to vote.
Okay, thank you. And then I'm gonna bring this up under other business, because it needs a little bit of discussion rather than just presentation. So, and I had a conversation with Ellie today, so the ETIP program, which is the National Research Energy Lab program that we're involved in with the Island Institute, they're coming to the island, in the middle of July, like 14th and 15th. And, so they're coming to look at the site where we've been working with them on a biomass project that could potentially take some of the biomass that's waste material at the transfer station and, generate electricity from that. And we did that in part because we really want to come up with a scheme to reduce that biomass, and we're trying to figure out, is it cost effective to try to generate any kind of electricity from that, or do we just want to burn it? And so that's the goal of that project. We've been working on it for almost a year now with the National Research Lab. It's a program through the Island Institute. We don't have to pay anything for their expertise, and the outcome is really an assessment of the cost-benefit analysis of that project. But they're coming to the island, I think it's the 14th and 15th. And so the way Ellie has it set up right now,
July.
14th and 15th of July, and she really wants there's a sort of a stakeholder meeting, which is not a island-wide invite, it's really selected stakeholders. Selectboard being one of the stakeholders, she would like as many people to participate as possible. Right now, the way it's set up is the stakeholder meeting that this group would participate in is on Tuesday evening, and then we have a select board meeting on Wednesday evening, and they were going to make a sort of more public general presentation prior to that select board meeting. I did say to her, I don't know, but maybe for the select board, kind of doing it all in one day might be better. So right now she's got it advertised as 2 different nights, and so I was just trying to gauge what people's, so either, she said if you come to one, it would be, if you had to pick one thing to do, it's the stakeholder meeting that she would like to have the board attend. So right now, that would be Tuesday, and then if we have a meeting Wednesday, then you have 2 nights that you're gonna be tied up.
So if the board attends that, does that have to be a public meeting then?
Good
So
question.
it's about.
If the select board is going to be engaged in the discussion and
Yeah,
talking about municipal things, yes, if you're there as a participant, kind of listen in and,
That was kind of my question before, so.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think we're not really discussing town business.
Yeah.
So it's really when you're deliberating about town business that the public needs to have access to. This is more about, I think sort of the project and sort of, what's important to us. I don't know, it's a good question. If we have to notice it, we'll notice it, but before that's sort of.
Well, I was saying it because if you have to notice it, then you might as well have one meeting, right?
It was more about people's schedules, because I would hate to see people not come Tuesday when she wants us to be there and then only come Wednesday. So what's people's general preference? Do you want to try to consolidate it to one evening and start earlier? Or
I'd rather have it one.
What day are we talking about?
it would be Wednesday, the 15th,
16th.
16th?
The 16th. So,
Well, I'm such a geek about this, I would do 2 nights.
Well, and so I think what they would do is move their kind of public thing to Tuesday night, and you can go to that along with public.
We already have a board of selectmen meeting on the 16th.
Right.
Right.
So what I was thinking of my life anyway, sort of having it all happen at the same day, then I'm only, having to kind of set aside that particular day.
Like, or even like we did before, we have a pre-meeting or an earlier
Right.
meeting, go over, take a
Exactly.
break, and then do, like, that would be okay.
Yeah, and I think we can find out, I think it's more like people being, on the island, available. We can decide on the time, but I think doing it does that make any difference to you, Vika? Our select board meeting will still start at 6, so we would just do this prior to 6.
So are we moving the select board meeting to Tuesday?
No, we're gonna move the ETIP meeting to Wednesday.
And they'll be able to come for that?
They're gonna be here for 2 days.
But are they here on Monday and Tuesday or Tuesday? and
Tuesday and
Wednesday.
Oh,
What's the organization?
What was that?
What's the name of that organization? Or is it just the abbreviation? I don't-
It's part of the Department of Energy, and it's I'm not gonna be able, because they changed the name because it had some term that was not acceptable.
Well, it's an acronym, you said an acronym, right?
It's ETIP, and it's,
ETIP.
yeah, and I think I will send you guys the agenda. I'll have Ellie make that change, and then I'll send you the agenda for your whole visit in case you want to participate in it. But for example, the stakeholder meeting, I think Public Works might attend because they manage all the liquid waste and things like, and the stakeholder meeting is intended to be, they may have specific questions that they're looking for feedback on. It's really to help them with the project.
nice.
And Eastport has, they got $1 million grant from the Department of Energy to do battery storage after they completed this kind of stuff. So there is, and this program seems to be so far, unimpacted by some of the issues at the federal level.
It's amazing.
All right, great. So the consensus is change our meeting, the stakeholder meeting, till Wednesday, the same day as got it. Okay. And I think there's anything else on other business. I will, I'd probably move that down. So anybody else have anything on other business? This is really intended for mostly kind of the kind of thing Vika just brought up, like something we didn't expect to have happen. But, all right, so next it's communications. And does anybody, Vika, do you have any communications you want to?
Yep, I do have two. Most of you, I think, are aware of this. Earhart, this might be, most likely is totally new discussion. So the Grinnell land swap discussion, if you recall the Grinnells reached out with an alternate proposal for land swap to their land and town land, and would like to bring that in front of the board for discussion. They brought it, they connected with me several weeks back, and I had communicated it to the board and communicated with them and told them that once we get through the budget process town meeting, then it will get revisited. And so I said that I would mention it, and the board can make a decision at what point, if you want to have that discussion and have that be something that you discuss. In the past, they did suggest that there would be 2 representatives that could be provided by the select board to continue discussions with them. The board had decided to collectively make a decision as one and provided a proposal, and then they're now providing something alternative. And so I can put it, with Carol's discussion, if you want to discuss it sooner than later, or if you want to kind of push it off a little bit longer. Either way, I said I would mention it to you and have you, through conversations, determine whether to have that be a discussion sooner or later, or I can connect with Carol more about it when we're talking about agenda items, and then she can follow up with you guys if that's something.
Has there already been a board discussion about sort of the pros and cons and the?
Yes, so what I would suggest is, why don't you and I connect, and I can provide you a more detailed background with any information and kind of the historical background of it, so then you can be brought more up to speed with what I'm talking about, if
And
that
then
works.
I guess one question I have is you say they have another, I think the last time we saw them, they had an alternative proposal. So are you saying they have a new alternative proposal?
I can forward you the information. There is not a lot of detail in it, and I think that they're kind of hoping that they could have board's time to
Yeah, and I guess
discuss it.
if we were gonna, personally, I would wanna have a specific proposal. If we were gonna take up the board time to discuss it, I don't wanna come and have a discussion, you know?
It's, what it is it's another drawing of, proposed land swap. So it's not any kind of engineering designs or anything that's further detailed.
What I would suggest is sort of not knowing what this looks like, and I will say the board has generally not entertained more, well, we have had more discussion, but it's kind of this ongoing thing. I think maybe I can connect with Vika and then come back, and if we, come back with a recommendation to the board based on what she's got for information. And also, I believe the code enforcement officer has advised on this matter. And
I believe so, but going off memory, I don't remember what detail of that
One of the
was.
things I recall on the board was we suggested that the property owner contact the code enforcement officer to discuss alternatives. And if that hasn't been done, I don't really want to go to the board. So I think I think I could get a little bit more information about where are we at and is it time to speak with the board. And the other thing is, I think as long as they're gonna be on the island for a while, we have some time if they wanna meet, but I think we need to make sure it's worthwhile to put it on, that we can, and that other alternatives have been exhausted. Not trying to, tell them tough luck, but just be practical. But it would be good also for, I think, for Gerhard to come up, to get up to speed before we even decide as a board, because otherwise we don't really know what we're talking about. Yeah. Anything else?
So the only other thing is annually, a few members from the Cumberland County Sheriff's Department come out here for a little event that they like to call Coffee with the Cop. And so they had reached out to me and were wondering, and I didn't have any issues with it. In the past, it's not anything that the select board attended or was advertised for a select board. It was really, sometimes they've done it at the store. The last couple of years, they've really liked going to the Niblick and sitting up there. And so people kind of see 4 or 5, big men dressed up in uniforms and approach them. And so where it stands right now is they'll be coming out next Tuesday for a couple of hours. And I'll probably, drop them off at the Niblick or have somebody coordinate that, and people
That's
can.
Tuesday the 8th. I'd like to see it more. I know that they're in charge of advertising, but it was I thought it was under the wire last year, and I think it's an interesting thing for our community. Are they in charge of the promotion of it?
I wouldn't say anyone's really in charge of the promotion with it. I think last year it was under the wire because I think Bob, who was the chair, kind of wanted the opportunity to have it be a discussion, with the municipality folks. And so I went, he went, and then some members of the public ended up being there, and we really had more thorough discussions of what does the contract entail, really kind of understanding, can we have more than one sheriff? What does that look like? It made it easy to have that conversation in person,
Do we need to have those conversations again?
No.
Okay.
Unless we want to pay a lot of money to have any additional services, I would say not at this point. so.
Do you know what time they'll be here?
I would tell you, but my phone keeps spinning, so right now, no. But if it's not on the website yet, I will make sure that we have it on our website and on the calendar. And then maybe we can send out, I don't know about a text alert. Text alert might be a little too, because we're also, it's not anything we're looking to have 100 people to show up. It's,
Okay.
I think,
And they'll be at
casual,
the Niblick?
most likely at the Niblick, yeah. But yeah, I'll make sure that we have it on the website if it's not there yet, but I'd give you the time, but I can't because it's spinning.
So anything else on communications?
Yeah. Richard, do you want to talk about it, or do you want to?
Oh,
Oh, that's
I
right.
don't,
Pardon me?
I don't think so.
So, a member of our community reached out to, I don't know who they reached out to.
They reached out to the whole board.
The
The
whole
whole
board.
board, thank
That's
you.
right, that's right.
And about some concerns with CTC, so Richard and I, in our official capacity as the CTC subcommittee, met with her. It was very informative, and she was well informed. One of her primary concerns was how CTC has a much higher rate for parkings for the seasonal at the Route 1 parking lot compared to the cost for residential parking. So she gave lots of good reasons. This is a concern she'd had in the past. And she also had plans, I believe today, to speak with Matt and Kendra about, who's on the CTC board, about this same concern. So it was actually very informative as well informed. And as a seasonal resident, she feels that it is unfair to her to be charged so much by CTC for a seasonal parking permit. So it was very informative, and I carried on officially to Matt and said these were concerns of someone in the community, and he and I and Richard will meet later in this month of July to discuss it further.
Is this the 6 month, I don't remember, the half season or
Yeah.
whatever it is?
Yeah.
It's
It's the Rubik cube, they try to come up with, who pays what when, and they're just trying to make their expenses. And there are some discounts Islanders get. And I think it's a matter of getting her up to speed with understanding.
Right, but this is paying,
It's nothing to do with the town, really.
it's a part of the year block you're paying for this.
Yeah.
What you're talking, not the daily fee.
Yeah,
Right.
and it's not really a town function, but
Right.
it does sort of interface with the town.
But as representing what people in the community say, that's informative, and
She's
we'll have an informational meeting with Matt Ridgway to discuss it.
And I guess the only communication I have is that Vika, and this happened kind of quickly after our meeting last Wednesday. Vika and I had a pretty brief meeting with our engineering consultant, GEI, with Lisa, and who was here last Wednesday, but also Dan Bannon, who's the engineer. And we talked about, several of the projects they're working on, just to make sure, for example, they came away with sort of the right instructions from that meeting, and I think they are. And then we also asked them I had some questions personally about Bennett's Cove, but I think Vika shared some of those concerns, and I don't want to get into it in detail tonight, but I think we may be hearing some information back from them just to get some clarification so that, before they actually submit a permit application to the DEP on the Bennett's Cove project. So, and then we did also, perhaps the most amusing thing was that we signed a contract with them on the Stone Wharf project in February. We had a meeting in April, and here we are in July, and I was like, wow, and they have been waiting for the survey data So Vika and I and Bob and everybody else have been emailing the guy who has since retired, so our emails were just going into cyberspace.
Oh,
And so we've all been bombarding them with, including the engineer, and it turned, Vika made one phone call, and it's resolved.
Within a half an hour, we had the
So
information.
that was a lesson for me, is like, don't
Yeah.
just email,
Yeah.
because as soon as it turned out the guy retired, they weren't getting the emails, and, you know.
They also weren't bouncing back,
Right.
which,
yeah,
Which is
That's-
another thing, though, I
yeah.
mean, Herb did confirm that generally you're not gonna get a bounce back these days, it just doesn't, they don't do that so much anymore. So, anyway, the situation there is lesson learned, and we're back on track on the stone pier in terms of, you know, I think now that he has that, I think we'll be able to get a more realistic timeline, because
So
we
the
have.
data was there, it was all compiled, it just wasn't getting.
So that data was generated through our prior contract with Weston and Sampson, and this is, and so we did ask for the data from Weston and Sampson, they never provided it. We did, actually, it's in the contract with Weston and Sampson. The surveyor we thought was being uncooperative, but as it turns out, they really just didn't know they were looking. Weston and Sampson was initially asked, requested, and I don't think they did. But I will say, the other practice that we've tried to come up with is that when we do these projects, we ask for these files as part of the deliverable, so that we don't have to go through this hassle. And so, and people are, that's a pretty standard practice, so we just have to know how to do it. So anyway, I will, you know, you'll be hearing more about that, I just wanted to let you know that we had a brief discussion, just because it is time for, because Lisa is working on the application. So anyway, that's that, okay. So I think anything else, in communications, anybody wants to share? Okay. So then I think the next thing is item 7, to approve the minutes from the June 18th, 2025 meeting. And I think Chris emailed those to all of us, so has everybody received the minutes? Okay. Anybody want to make a motion on the minutes? David?
Move to accept the minutes from the June 18th, 2025 meeting.
Second? All right, Jane, all in favor? Okay, so items to be placed on a future agenda, I think one thing is, are we clear, our next meeting is July 16th on a Wednesday at the usual time?
At 6 o'clock.
Yeah. And we may have a pre-meeting with these other guys, and then, given that we may have a meeting, sort of an orientation at the end of the month, but we won't have another board meeting. When would the next board meeting be after that?
The following board meeting will be on Wednesday, August 6th.
Okay. So I think given that's pretty close to the workshop for the parking, I think, I would put sort of the plan, I think we should be in agreement kind of how we're gonna roll out that traffic workshop. So I would put that on the agenda, and what we can do in the meantime is maybe put together a document that might, like we did this once before, where, you know, what questions do we want to cover in this discussion, this community conversation? And kind of in that next meeting, at least be in agreement so we can promote it and have a structure for it. And see if, assuming that Ellie is willing to, you know, she has a life, she might actually have something else to do, but, you know, if she's willing to facilitate it, whatever we might need to support that.
Just a request, when we have our select board announcement, that the time of the meeting be a part of that. It was probably
Yeah, it normally is, that
just
was
an
my,
oversight this
that was my mistake, yeah.
So is there anything else? I think we probably, will at least have an update. So we probably have a treasurer's report at the next meeting, is that, yeah, and, I'm just trying to think, is there anything else people feel? I think some of these engineering projects, I think we may be close to having a parking design. And so we might wanna review that, because we should really probably, you know, review and reach a consensus that we wanna send it on to the planning board.
Parking design
For Jenks Road and.
oh, that's what I thought.
So the goal is to try to get that before the planning board sometime in our lifetime. So,
Yeah,
for Jenks and the Hook.
Yeah. So I think what I'll do is, I'll email Lisa and say, if you'd really like to have kind of this final, not the application, but the plan, so that we can agree, and then she can submit it.
Says they're making the adjustments for the discussion for parking spots.
After our meeting, so
Yeah.
you will tell me if I should proceed with this conversation or not, but after our meeting, in speaking with constituents in the community, and also thinking about it, I would like to reconsider the number of spots. Is it okay for me to discuss that at this time, or not? So please advise me.
I think that, I think I wouldn't be discussing it in the community per se.
So I think this is where the discussion with the attorney is gonna be helpful.
Thank you.
And I don't wanna put you on the spot,
Yep.
but you are not the individual
Right.
of one of the two members who the board selected. So if anybody approaches, and I'm gonna use you as an example because you brought this up, if anybody approaches you about Jenks Road, you tell them one of two things: go see Vika or go see the two people that represent that board. And that's how you can siphon some of those discussions, so when you're put in that spot, you're redirecting those conversations.
Thank you, good.
So,
And I will say, a piece of information we did get today is that, if we're 5 spaces or less than 5 spaces, we do not need an ADA
yeah.
spot. So that may
Okay,
Yeah.
influence your thinking.
thank you.
And
Okay.
the only thing I would add is that those residents have been more than willing and cooperative, and so I really want to try to keep that open communication flowing, because that could very well be the example for how we can work well with residents to get things done.
Then the other thing is, I think, we are planning, I think we'll want an update, at that next meeting, we'll want an update on where the audit situation stands. So I think we gotta keep that kind of front and center so that we don't lose, sight of that. And if we haven't met with them in person, or, some way, even remotely, then we'll figure out we'll have to be deciding what maybe the next steps are with Vika's advice. So I just want to keep the audit on the front burner. Okay, anything else for the next meeting?
The housing meeting has been, the ad hoc housing committee has been meeting. We're working on a survey for the community around different housing options. Also, it looks like we'll be partnering with the Island Institute to do a survey of all of the island and coastal communities within the catchment of what are things that are happening there. So I'm just letting you know.
So do you want that on the agenda for the next meeting?
No, because I don't think our survey will be ready, but I'd like it to be.
Okay,
I'll let you know.
all right.
So maybe a future agenda item.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, well, I think we've covered that, so I think the next thing is to move into executive session to do the remainder of what, so this is the personnel issue, so does somebody wanna, make a motion on the executive session?
I move that we move into executive session.
And we have to read the whole
No,
thing,
yeah, you got it. We need to have the,
the actual reason.
yes.
I move that we move into executive session pursuant to 1 MRSA 6A personnel appointments.
Second, David? All in favor?